In today's episode, I just want to share with you some of the red flags and those fine lines between judging, overthinking, overcomplicating, hoping and wanting your job to be the answer, meaning that you're over evaluating companies and you haven't even been offered a job yet. And that can be really bad and very, very detrimental. It can, lengthen your time on unemployment. It can start making you feel like you actually have to settle, because at some point you feel like you just do need a job. You will take anything and everything just because you have to get back to work. And I don't want that to happen for you. So there is a balance between evaluating organizations and not overthinking it or not turning it into judgment mode. All right. So I'm going to give you some ways to kind of know if you're towing that line and sort of where you're at. Now, the first thing I want you to remember, so step number 1 is that unless you've actually been offered the job, you haven't been offered the job. Or unless you've actually been given an interview, you haven't been given an interview. And this matters because you might be somebody that's like, I don't want to interview at this company because I don't, I just, I've heard weird things or, I mean, I'm not saying that the company is unethical and you've heard that it's a horrible culture. Like, don't interview with them. But let's say if you're like, I'm not too sure, I was really looking for like a mid-sized company and this is a really big company, or, I don't really know anything about my boss. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to make up criteria, but whatever that criteria that's putting a red flag, there are definitely reasons to say no to job opportunities, but a lot of times we're evaluating them and the opportunity way too early. So the first thing, when I say step number 1 is like, have you been actually given the interview yet? Have you actually, made it to the final rounds yet? Is that check where you're at in the process. Now, if you're incredibly busy and you have lots of interviews coming up and you don't have a lot of time and you know that this one company is not a good fit or the position's not a good fit, then just don't do it. Okay, fine. But let's say you do have the time, but you're overthinking it ahead of time, right? So you haven't even been given the interview yet. Let's say you have made it through the first couple rounds and you're not really feeling it, or you're like, look, I don't know about the Eastern time zone thing. I don't know about the travel. I don't know about the title. I don't know about the compensation. Right. And you're starting to feel yourself pull back, wanting to drop out of the interview process. If it's really early on, I wanna encourage you to at least get to the hiring managers or the C-suite, actually make it to some of those longer more final rounds of the interview process before declining the remaining of the interviews. It is very possible even to make it all the way to the very, 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 very final round and get the job offer and actually decline the position. So you don't have to actually take the job. But what you don't know yet is, are those criteria set in stone? Is this the end all be all? Is this what everybody is doing at the organization? And the best way to find out is to have negotiating power. So you can have negotiating power even if you're interviewing for a director level role, but you really want a senior director role. I've had clients go all the way through the interview process as a director and then spin it at the last minute and say, I really think this is a senior director role. And maybe that company rewrites the job description and gives you a senior director title, or they don't. And if they don't, you can still turn it down. But what you've learned in the process is being a better negotiator, right? Being able to show your worth, to show the value that you bring at your organization. So much so that even if they can't rewrite that job description, now you've wowed them. And even being able to stand up for yourself and to say, hey, this isn't the right fit for me, and here's the reasons why, then you have negotiating power for another role at their organization. Or maybe they're impressed by you and they really wanted to bring you on, but they can't right now. And so they're going to put you in touch with another leader at their organization or somebody else, right? Like they're going to do you a favor. So it's always really important if you're evaluating organizations, if you're evaluating opportunities, that you consider where you're at in the timeline. Is it worth your while to go through the interview process anyway? Is it worth your while to have a little bit of what I call that effort attitude in the interview process? Where it's like, yeah, you're evaluating them. So you're saying things that you wouldn't have normally said. You're pushing back about certain things. You're actually saying, hey, I don't this role is definitely should be titled at senior director. It's not a director level role. I'll never be happy, whatever that might be. Maybe it's not the right compensation. And so you can use it as an opportunity to negotiate ahead of time, right? So as part of the evaluation process, you can, evaluate them. Another thing that comes up for a lot of my clients is that they will say things like, I need to really care about the organizations. And so working for an organization that you're passionate about can be very, very fulfilling. But the problem with that is that when you're evaluating companies based on their mission and the work that they're doing, and that's your sole criteria, then you might find yourself seeking for approval outside of yourself. A lot of times you might find yourself in a specific department or division or something where you're able to really give back. So I'm not saying that it's not important to do that, but I'm just saying there's so many ways that we can find ourselves giving back, working on something that we're really passionate about. The other thing to consider when you're evaluating your passions would be that that pay scale or whatever you might be able, like, let's say, AI is very big right now and you want to work at an AI company and you're going to get paid like a ridiculous amount of money. It's possible that you could work at this organization, get a really high title, a ridiculous amount of money. You can manage the hours that you work, meaning that, I'm not saying that advocating for working 80-hour work weeks, but you can say, okay, I'm not necessarily passionate about this company, but because I have work life balance, I'm making more money than I ever was before. Now I can give back in other ways, like maybe at my church or volunteer organizations or financially give back. And so there are so many multiple ways we can stay in integrity and we can give back, and that we don't even know how that's going to play out. Right. And so I encourage you that if you're looking for a job to fulfill your passion, be very open in how that's going to play out. Again, go through the interview process. You might find a passionate job just because your boss is so freaking cool. And you're like, I love partnering with this boss. This is the most amazing job I've ever had. Yeah, we're not changing the world, but the work that I'm doing on a daily basis feels so fulfilling. So give it a shot. Again, at the end of the day, you get to evaluate them as much as they're evaluating you. So you get to choose, right? I take this job, I don't take this job. But along the process, it's important to give it a shot, to actually challenge yourself. Could I turn this into something? Can I learn something about it through this interview process? Learn something about myself. And the third and final way that this really shows up for women in a negative, right? The red flag is when you are not going for specific titles. So you'll say something like, I don't care about the title. I just want a job that matters, that's fulfilling. Right. And so you're evaluating them, as much as they're evaluating you, and you're like, I'll just go into this company and whatever title. And so then you might go for like a lower level title, so that you can just see, do they wow you? Do they have a good culture? They have to prove themselves to you. But one of the problems with that is that at the director level, or let's say senior manager level, you're not really in a position to have the level of influence and authority that you might be desiring in a job. And so, whenever you find yourself saying a little bit too frequently, I don't care about the title, all I care about is whether or not I like the job. And if you're laughing at me right now, it's because so many women who listen to this podcast are past that, right? Like they've figured out that the title does matter. But But if you're not there yet, I just want to challenge you to question because I do think the title matters. And on that evaluating standpoint, what I recommend is that if the title is too low and you find yourself going on multiple job interviews and getting called in for jobs that are below your title, again, I recommend doing the interviews, challenging them to up level the role, having conversations, be very clear in your conversations, not just like, I want a vice president level title, but why you're wanting that title and what kind of impact you want to be making, and still continue to entertain those conversations. Now, I do challenge you to make the title matter. And then also on the flip side, to be willing to engage in those initial conversations so that you can figure out and learn a little bit more about the company and what types of titles and what type of fit they might have available for you. As a recap, I really want to remind you that truly, truly, you are evaluating your organizations that you're working for as much as they're evaluating you. No matter what stage of the process you're in, no matter how long you've been interviewing, it is important to stay in that integrity and to know your worth, know what your value is that you're bringing to your organizations. And then it's also important to challenge yourself and ask yourself along the way, A, am I closing doors unnecessarily? Am I getting enough opportunities? Am I getting enough job offers? Am I putting myself out there in that higher level leadership way?